You're standing in a candlelit monastery, the air thick with the scent of old parchment. A hooded figure kneels in prayer, his whispered words echoing off stone walls. Who is he? Why does his life, shaped by a 1,600-year-old legacy, still ripple through the world today? This is the story of the Augustinians, men and women whose faith, grit, and ideas have quietly shaped history. Stick with me, because what you're about to hear might just change how you see the world. Smash that like button if you're ready to uncover their story, and subscribe to join us on this journey. Let's start with the man who ignited it all, Augustine of Hippo. Born in 354 AD in Thagast, a small Roman town in what's now Algeria, Augustine wasn't always a saint. Far from it. Picture a young man, brilliant but restless, chasing pleasure, philosophy, and everything in between. He was a seeker, torn between the world's temptations and a deeper hunger for truth. His mother, Monica, a devout Christian, prayed relentlessly for him. Her faith was unshakable, but Augustine? He was a skeptic, diving into Manichaeism, a dualistic religion promising answers but leaving him empty. By his 20s, Augustine was a rock-star teacher of rhetoric, dazzling crowds in Carthage and Rome. But something gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that life was more than fleeting pleasures or clever words. Then, in Milan, everything changed. Enter Ambrose, the bishop whose fiery preaching cut through Augustine's doubts like a blade. One day, in a garden, Augustine heard a child's voice chanting, "Take and read." He opened the Bible, and Romans 13 verses 13 to 14 hit him like lightning, "Put on the Lord Jesus Christ, and make no provision for the desires of the flesh." He converted in 386 AD, baptized by Ambrose, and his life took a radical turn. Augustine became a priest, then bishop of Hippo, preaching, writing, and defending the faith against heresies like Pelagianism, which claimed humans could earn salvation without God's grace. His books, Confessions and City of God, are still read worldwide, from seminaries in Brazil to universities in Tokyo. Confessions isn't just a memoir, it's a raw, honest journey of a man wrestling with his flaws, seeking God. City of God. It's a bold vision of history as a clash between divine and earthly kingdoms. Augustine's ideas laid the foundation for Western theology, influencing thinkers like Thomas Aquinas and even modern debates on free will. But here's the kicker, Augustine didn't just write books. He lived with a radical commitment to community. In Hippo, he formed a monastic community, blending prayer, work, and study. His Rule, a short guide for communal living, emphasized humility, charity, and obedience. It wasn't just a set of instructions, it was a way of life that would outlast him. This rule became the spark for the Augustinian order, but how did a North African bishop's vision spread across continents? And what made it endure through empires, wars, and revolutions? Before we dive deeper, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Comment below, what do you think drove Augustine to change his life so dramatically? Was it his mother's prayers, Ambrose's words, or something else? Now, let's follow the thread. Augustine died in 430 AD as barbarians besieged Hippo. His community scattered, but his rule survived, copied by monks and carried across Europe. By the 11th century, small groups of hermits and priests began adopting it, living in simplicity and prayer. These weren't formal orders yet, just scattered communities inspired by Augustine's vision. But something big was brewing. In 1256, Pope Alexander IV united these groups into the Order of St. Augustine, or OSA. This was no small move. It gave the Augustinians structure, purpose, and a mission to spread the gospel. The Augustinians weren't cloistered monks hiding from the world. They were active, preaching in cities, teaching in universities, and serving the poor. Their black robes became a symbol of service, from Spain to the Philippines. They emphasized community life, no private property, everything shared. This wasn't just about spirituality, it was practical. In a world of feudal lords and rampant poverty, their model was revolutionary. But here's where it gets wild. The Augustinians didn't just preach, they shaped history in ways you'd never expect. One of their own, a German friar named Martin Luther, would spark a firestorm that changed the world forever. What did he do, and how did the Augustinians respond? That's coming up, but first, I need your thoughts. Comment: have you ever heard of Augustine's rule before? The Augustinian story isn't just about the past, it's alive today. But how did they go from a bishop's vision to a global force? And what challenges nearly broke them? Stick around, because the next part will blow your mind. Picture Europe in the late Middle Ages. Cities are growing, trade is booming, and the church is the heartbeat of society. The Augustinians, with their black robes and fiery sermons, are right in the thick of it. They're not locked away in monasteries like some orders. They're out in the streets, preaching to merchants in Florence, debating scholars in Paris, and tending to the sick in plague-ravaged villages. Their focus on community, sharing everything, owning nothing, sets them apart. In a world where power and wealth often define worth, their way of life is a bold statement. It's like they're saying, faith isn't just about prayer, it's about action. And people notice. Their churches fill with listeners, from peasants to princes. But what really sets the Augustinians apart is their love for learning. They dive into Augustine's writings, wrestling with big questions about God, free will, and the human soul. They're not just parroting his words, they're building on them. Augustinian scholars like Giles of Rome become intellectual heavyweights, advising popes and shaping church doctrine. Their schools and universities, from Oxford to Salamanca, train minds that influence law, theology, and even politics. Imagine a young student in 14th-century Spain, poring over Augustine's Confessions, his heart racing as he realizes faith and reason can coexist. That's the Augustinian legacy, minds on fire, hearts open to God. Now, here's where things get intense. The Augustinians aren't just scholars or preachers, they're explorers of the soul and the world. By the 15th century, they're crossing oceans. When Spanish and Portuguese ships sail to the Americas and Asia, Augustinian friars are on board. They land in the Philippines in 1565, building some of the first churches in Asia. In Mexico, they're baptizing thousands, learning native languages like Nahuatl to share the gospel. Their missions stretch from Japan to Peru, often at great cost. Many face disease, persecution, or martyrdom. Why risk it all? Because they believe Augustine's vision of a universal church isn't just a dream, it's a mission. But hold on, because there's a storm coming. In the early 16th century, one Augustinian friar steps into the spotlight and turns the world upside down. His name? Martin Luther. Yes, that Martin Luther. He's a German Augustinian, steeped in Augustine's writings, especially on grace and salvation. But Luther's wrestling with his own doubts. He sees corruption in the church, indulgences sold like tickets to heaven, clergy living like kings. He's furious, but also deeply spiritual, haunted by the question of how a flawed human can stand before a perfect God. In 1517, he nails his 95 Theses to a church door in Wittenberg, demanding reform. The Reformation is born, and it fractures Christianity. Here's the twist: Luther's Augustinian training shapes his ideas. Augustine's focus on grace, God's unearned gift, becomes Luther's battle cry: salvation comes through faith alone, not works or payments. But the Augustinians as an order don't follow him. They stay loyal to the Catholic Church, even as some of their own are drawn to his ideas. It's a gut-wrenching moment. The order that nurtured Luther now faces a choice: reform from within or stand firm. They choose the latter, doubling down on their mission to preach, teach, and serve. But the Reformation leaves scars. Europe splits, wars erupt, and the Augustinians find themselves on the front lines of a spiritual battle. Now, let's shift gears. The Augustinians don't just survive the Reformation, they adapt and thrive. By the 17th century, they're rebuilding, focusing on education and charity. They establish schools across Europe and the Americas, teaching everything from theology to astronomy. In places like Brazil, where 130 million Catholics live today, Augustinian priests are shaping communities, running orphanages, and feeding the poor. Their hospitals and shelters become lifelines in times of crisis. But it's not all smooth sailing. The rise of secularism and the Enlightenment challenges their influence. Some governments seize their lands, close their monasteries. How do they keep going? What keeps their fire burning when the world seems to turn against them? That's where things get even more incredible. The Augustinians find strength in their roots, Augustine's rule, with its call to humility and community. They lean into their identity, not as powerful clerics, but as servants. In the 19th century, they faced new trials, revolutions, anti-clerical laws, and even exile. Yet they keep spreading, from Australia to Africa. Their secret? They're not just preaching dogma, they're living it, meeting people where they are, whether it's a war-torn village or a bustling city. But there's one story that will leave you speechless. It involves an Augustinian, a forgotten relic, and a discovery that could rewrite history. What did they find, and why does it matter? Stick around, because the next part will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the Augustinians. You're about to hear a story that sounds like it's straight out of a mystery novel, but it's real, and it's tied to the Augustinians in a way that might just give you chills. In 1888, an Augustinian friar in a small Spanish monastery uncovers a dusty chest hidden behind a crumbling wall. Inside, a collection of manuscripts, some in Augustine's own handwriting, or so the whispers claim. These pages aren't just old, they hint at a lost chapter of his life, one that could reshape how we see his teachings. Is it possible Augustine left behind secrets the Church never meant to reveal? The discovery sends shockwaves through the order. Scholars pore over the texts, debating their authenticity. Some say they're forgeries, others insist they're genuine, pointing to the distinct Latin style that mirrors Augustine's Confessions. One manuscript describes a vision Augustine allegedly had late in life, a dream of a unified church bridging East and West. If true, it's a bombshell. The Catholic Church in the 19th century is grappling with modernity, and this could be a rallying cry for unity. The Augustinians guard the find closely, but word leaks out, sparking heated debates in Rome and beyond. Was Augustine pointing to a future the Church ignored? The question hangs in the air, unanswered, as the manuscripts vanish into Vatican archives. Or do they? Some say the Augustinians still hold copies, waiting for the right moment to share them. Now, let's zoom out. The Augustinians aren't just chasing ancient texts, they're navigating a rapidly changing world. By the 20th century, they're on every continent, from the bustling streets of Chicago to remote villages in Tanzania. Their schools educate thousands, blending Augustine's love for reason with a passion for faith. In the Philippines, they run universities that train doctors, lawyers, and priests, all rooted in the idea that truth, whether scientific or spiritual, leads to God. Their missions in places like India focus on the marginalized, orphans, refugees, the sick. Picture a young Augustinian friar in a Kenyan slum, teaching kids to read under a tin roof. That's their heart, service, no matter the cost. But here's where it gets gritty. The 20th century throws curveballs. 2 world wars, economic crashes, and rising secularism test their resolve. In some countries, like Mexico during the 1920s, governments ban religious orders, forcing Augustinians underground. They celebrate Mass in secret, risking arrest to keep the faith alive. In Europe, some monasteries are bombed to rubble during World War II. Yet, they rebuild. Why? Because Augustine's rule isn't just words on a page, it's a blueprint for resilience. It tells them to lean on community, to find strength in shared purpose. When one friar falls, another steps up. It's like a relay race across centuries, each generation passing the torch. Let's fast forward to today. The Augustinians are still here, over 2,000 strong, active in 50 countries. In Brazil, where 130 million Catholics form the world's largest Catholic population, Augustinians run parishes and schools, tackling poverty and inequality. In Japan, they're a quiet presence, offering spiritual guidance in a largely non-Christian nation. Their work isn't flashy, no viral campaigns or megachurches. It's steady, rooted in Augustine's call to love God and neighbor. They're teachers, counselors, missionaries, living out a 1,600-year-old vision in a world of smartphones and AI. But here's the real question: why does this matter to you? The Augustinians aren't just a history lesson. They're a challenge. Their story asks, what do you stand for? Augustine wrestled with his flaws and found purpose. The friars faced wars, exile, and doubt, yet kept going. Today, they're building schools, feeding the hungry, and asking tough questions about faith in a skeptical age. Their legacy isn't in grand cathedrals, it's in lives changed, one act of service at a time. Maybe you're Catholic, maybe you're just curious, but their story pushes you to think, what's my purpose? How can I make a difference? Now, here's the final twist. Remember those manuscripts from 1888? In 2015, an Augustinian scholar in Peru claims to have found a clue, a reference in an old journal to a hidden archive in an Andean monastery. Could it hold the lost texts? The scholar's still searching, and the Augustinians aren't talking. It's a mystery that keeps you wondering, what else might they uncover? What secrets of Augustine's heart are still out there, waiting to inspire the next generation? Before we wrap up, hit that like button if this story moved you, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment, where are you watching from, and what part of the Augustinian story hit you hardest? Subscribe and ring the bell for more stories that dig deep into faith, history, and the human spirit. The Augustinians aren't just a relic of the past, they're a living call to action. What will you do with it?